Welcome to 10-Minute Record Reviews, episode 230. And this time I'm going to talk about something a little bit different for this channel, which is a relatively new record. This is something which came out in 2021. It's by Floating Points, otherwise known as the DJ EDM wizard Sam Shepard. Pharoah Sanders, the legendary spiritual jazz and free jazz tenor sax icon. And at points, the London Symphony Orchestra's string section. And there's this beautiful packaging to this release, including this die-cut cover, this wonderful painting by Julie Meritou inside. Anyway, it's a wonderful sounding release too. This is a record which took 5 years from inception to release. Eventually, the two main players got together, and subsequently, the arrangements created a role for the string section of the LSO. There is a fair amount of this which could be classified as, if not ambient, then ambient adjacent, but that's the beginning and the end of the connection to electronic dance music. For the most part, this record has much more in common with the spiritual and astral jazz music of the late 60s and early 70s, or at least some of the more conceptual stuff. Sanders is excellent here, but don't be fooled into thinking this is a Sanders solo album. It's basically a 46-minute continuous piece of music by Shepard. Sanders' saxophone is a regular feature, but there are also extended passages where Shepard and or the string section are central parts of the music, including some of the most dynamic passages. If I were a record store clerk, I'd probably file it under jazz, but it's kind of hard to categorize, and that's one of the reasons it's a fascinating collaboration. So Floating Points, better known as Sam Shepard, grew up in Manchester, and taking a leaf out of Brian May's book, he's both a serious and very good musician, but also, at times, a serious scientist. He's got a background in religion too, although apparently it didn't stick. His dad's a vicar. As a boy, he was a chorister at Manchester Cathedral. However, his academic interests were in science, and he ends up getting a PhD in neuroscience and epigenetics at University College London. His initial musical grounding was in classical and jazz. His gateway drugs, as he says, were Claude Debussy, Bill Evans, and Kenny Wheeler. But increasingly, DJing and EDM began to appeal, and he also got a real taste for collecting vinyl, and he has something like 10,000 records, which is, amongst other things, a relationship-challenging amount of records. He uses his student loan for his PhD to go tour the US from the UK and pick up all kinds of old records to bring back. On those trips, he also became a keen student of DJing technique in the United States and developed a very eclectic style, mixing in all kinds of unexpected genres into his mix. In 2008, he launched his Floating Points project with a couple of singles and also a remix of Sun Ra's I'll Wait For You, and he ends up catching a break when Jules Peterson, a BBC DJ, ends up featuring some of his tracks on the radio. When you listen to his stuff, as I did a fair amount in preparation for this review, you can hear that his music tends towards the open and minimal. He's not as extreme as someone, say, like Arvo Part, but with influences like Bill Evans and Claude Debussy, you could hear the compositional echoes of their work in his. As I mentioned, he went pro around 2008, but he was still trying to finish his PhD at the time, and so his first full-length LP, Alania, doesn't appear until 2015. And despite the fact that he'd become a regular fixture in the London DJ scene, Alania is not an EDM record, it's actually more improvisational electronic jazz. Jazz has always been a huge influence in his creative process, helped out at this particular point by the fact that his PhD supervisor apparently was friends with Sun Ra and gave him full license to pursue this other project while he was doing his work on neuroscience. He's also made some soundtrack music, like the 2017 EP Reflections Mojave Desert, which is based on the sonic experience of the desert, and then Crush in 2019, which was a much more straightforward EDM record. Pharoah Sanders, of course, is a spiritual jazz giant, maybe the spiritual jazz giant, and his decade of output between, say, 1967 and 1977 is as good as any sustained period of creativity in the jazz canon, in my view. Sanders, of course, came to prominence between 1965 and 1967 while playing with John Coltrane. Previously, he'd played with Sun Ra, who had opened his mind to improvisational experimental jazz, or space jazz, and had also opened his mind to the possibilities of working with larger ensembles and basically breaking free of established conventions. His greatest work arguably occurs between 1967 and 1973 on the records he put out for Impulse, where he composed a whole bunch of lengthy, sometimes sidelong suites with some of the most beautiful and elegant pastoral playing ever, combined with some of the fieriest tenor saxophone playing you're ever going to hear. In those records, he also blended in vocal work, his and others, and also Pan-African themes and a lot of African instrumentation. After 1973, I won't say he goes off the boil, but his music mellows, and there are certainly some high points, but in general, the most significant Sanders music, most people would say, comes out in that earlier period. He has a huge body of work, and of course he's not getting any younger. His last effort, serious effort as a leader, comes out in 2003 with a heartbeat, and that is released in digital formats only. However, when he hears Shepard's debut record Elenia in 2015, he's blown away by his vision. As other people have pointed out, these two artists actually have a fair amount in common. They are both prone to create music which alternates density and minimalism. They are both friends of long-form composition, and both of them in their own way have come to see music serving a variety of purposes, not least of which is catharsis. They're also both committed to improvisation. The challenge, of course, is that they had no friends in common. Eventually, Sanders reaches out to Lawaka Bop, which is David Byrne's label, to try and make the connection to see if something can happen. And the two get in touch sometime later in 2015 and began to plot what this record becomes. As I mentioned earlier, despite the contact in 2015, it took several years to bring both the music and the musicians together to make this record. By early 2019, Shepard, as far as I can tell, had most of the musical ideas and arrangements worked out, or at least in his head. In June of that year, he and Sanders get together to record in Los Angeles at Sargent Recording Studios what is basically the spine of this record, which is an extended recording of Shepard on keyboards and Sanders on sax. To that basic track, Shepard then subsequently added layers and layers of electronic and analog keyboards, and also wrote the string pieces, which are a major part of the second half of the composition. The string arrangements end up getting recorded in London a year later at Air Studios with the LSO string section. And so other than the strings, it's just the two players, Shepard and Sanders. Shepard is a producer, of course, and he plays a dozen different instruments on this record: piano, harpsichord, celesta, Fender Rhodes electric piano, Hammond organ, and I think 7 different synthesizers. Sanders, of course, is on tenor sax and at times vocals. Overall, this record presents a very gentle and beautiful piece of music, and that really starts from the off with the first movement. This is divided up into movements, although effectively it's really one continuous piece of music, with this little 7-note motif which repeats not all the way through, but at regular intervals through the whole piece of music, which is played by Shepard and overdubbed with all kinds of different keyboards. It's never really quite the same twice, or it might be, but it's just too hard to count. Anyway, that repeats every 9 seconds. Eventually, after a while, Sanders comes in. It's actually a very kind of amusing video that you can see on YouTube, where you can see Sanders and Shepard discussing when Sanders comes in, and Shepard's like, whenever you feel like it, what's he going to say? Sanders comes in playing really some of the most beautiful and elegant and pastoral kinds of passages that I think he's ever played. And yet, as ever, he never really falls into saxophone cliche. It's not intimate music. It's much more like wisdom somehow, or almost birdsong at points. On side 1, the strings come in here and there, though never essentially as on side 2. We never lose our focus on the peacefulness of Pharoah's sax. It's kind of, I guess, ironic to have him providing the calm and symphony orchestra providing the edginess, but that's what you have. You also at times have a little bit of vocalization by Pharoah, kind of channeling ever so slightly, a little bit of Leon Thomas. In the first half of side 2, the string section comes in much more centrally, and now for the first time the orchestral arrangement is really at the heart of it, and it's very, very dynamic. Then Pharoah comes back in. His playing is very closely mic'd here. It's very breathy. It's very gentle, and that then gives way to some trippy kind of synthy bird calls, and then eventually Sanders comes in honking like the king of the geese. There's then a kind of false ending, a bit of a gap, and then a dramatic moment from the strings to bring the whole piece to a close. You should be in no doubt this is a beautiful record. The minimalism of Shepard's composition, the tenderness of Sanders' playing, the lushness of the strings is a fantastic combination. However, I kind of find myself in the camp of people who want a little bit more from this. I'm okay with the occasional disappearances of Sanders here. That actually, I think, adds to the dramatic tension of the whole piece. I guess I'm left wanting another emotional gear. These are two musicians whose stock in trade is basically thinking on their feet, improvisation. And this record took 5 years to come together. Even when they get together, it still takes 2 years to produce this record, and I think that's probably a year and 11 months too long. It feels, frankly, like too much forethought, not really enough risk, which is kind of contrary to Sanders' best work. It's certainly a worthy coda to Sanders' career, if that's what this is, and it's an impressive outing for Shepard. But viewed against the greater body of Sanders' work, it's really more of an echo than anything canonical. For me, it's 4 to 5 stars.